Council members. Sue?
I just, when we went through this at the P&Z meetings, we had some show and tell. Did you have any pictures or any examples to give this evening?
Well, that was all generally related to the accessory dwelling
Dwelling
units.
unit, okay, but
Correct.
we also had some, okay, that's all right. Didn't bring any tonight.
I did not bring any.
Okay, Dan?
So, Bill, you're saying that we're going to, it's not necessarily in it right now, but insert language that applies to the footprint, not the total, whatever square footage, and it could be 3 stories or 2 stories or whatever.
It's in the ordinance, actually. If you were to look on page 6 of 6 of the draft ordinance, under the accessory structure definition, it states that size limitations contained within this code pertaining to accessory structures such as private garages and workshops shall apply to the land area occupied by such accessory structure.
Okay, so just land area.
Yeah. So that's essentially the building footprint and
Okay.
what we consider to be the foundation footprint.
Okay, thank you.
Walter?
Thank you, ma'am. Bill, if you're, I think you're doing 2 things here. One, you're pointing out that this entire section of the code is full of inconsistencies, and you're suggesting, correct me when I'm wrong, and you're suggesting that having consistency is a better way to approach this whole thing, so that you don't put the Board of Adjustment into a whole lot of meetings dealing with this little thing, that little thing, and so forth. Okay.
Correct.
And I would then suggest that the proposed changes are probably the more important part, but not being a P&C person like some of the folks up here are, I'm probably not as versed in those as I am with the cleaning up the language. With that being said, the item that you just talked to Dan about, when I first read it, and it says shall apply to the land area occupied by such accessory structure, I jumped to the lot that the structure's on, not to what you called in your discussion the footprint. Would footprint not be a better way to say it? And maybe the city attorney would have an opinion that you don't want to say it that way, so I don't know.
Well, I think I was trying to be more specific to state that the land area that occupies. Footprint, I think most people probably maybe understand or maybe have an intuitive understanding of what the footprint means, but the footprint is really the land area that the building occupies. So I guess I was trying to be a little bit more precise in the language to not have any potential confusion, but if that's...
Maybe it's just me, but land area took me to the lot the accessory structure is on. I mean, if you talk, well, it does say occupied. I'm not convinced this is the clearest it could be. Land area is an entire island or the entire continent or something. So it's, to me, I jump to the larger. And Sue's laughing, so apparently I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I mean, I can understand. I had footprint in the first initial draft. I thought I was trying to be a little bit more precise, not knowing that footprint may not have a definitive definition in the sense, in this case. You certainly could state something to the extent, if the council wished to, after you conduct the hearing, take consideration. But there may be, shall apply to the building footprint, and then you could put in parentheses afterwards the land area occupied by such accessory structure, so that you could integrate both the term footprint as well as kind of an explanation behind that.
Or we could have a definition included, perhaps, as we have definitions elsewhere in this.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Very good. Sure.
I recognize that it may not be intuitive as the way it was written. The intent was to try to be a little bit more precise, and I didn't, like I said, I had footprint in the first draft and then modified it to that language. But that could be added as well.
Since we had a reference to the folks over at this table, Rod, did you have something to contribute to the discussion about the definition?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Bill's suggestion of doing the parentheses at the back to just clarify would probably be a simple solution to help clarify.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
I mean, that sounds good, or the idea. I hear what Walter's saying. I'm just thinking maybe, footprint and then define it as the land, I was going to say defined by the foundation of the structure, so that it's, specifically that piece of ground and not the island that it's sitting on, or the island that is in the middle of the body of water, or whatever we're thinking here.
Maybe we'll get some ideas during the course of our public hearing. What do you think? We can talk
right.
about
We still
that
have a
later.
public hearing.
And I think the footprint land area, if it's all combined, is fine, but it was specifically important to delineate that because any eaves hanging over don't count.
Mm-hmm.
And
Understood.
And then when you're also talking about it was interesting to me to find out a garage that's actually part of the house, like could be under the house, is still considered accessory structure, even though it's part of the, it could be part of the main house.
Let's see, let's give Wayne a chance here.
Couple of questions, Bill. I'm assuming that setbacks still apply.
Correct.
Then the other question is, at one time we had a requirement that only a percentage of a given lot could be covered by a footprint, foundation area, or land area covered by a structure. Do we still have that percentage requirement?
Currently, under the zoning code, only 50% of the required rear yard area may be occupied by a detached accessory structure. So 50% of the required rear yard area. So it's not the entire lot itself, but it is the required rear yard area.
So you have to have a lot big enough in order to be able to do this.
Correct. And if you have, there are height limitations that apply to detached accessory structures that are placed within that rear yard area that would supersede some of the other language that was in the R4 and the RO district, which complicates it a little bit. We're not looking at amending that tonight, but just to provide a little bit of background, that if you do have an accessory structure that's within the rear yard area, the height limit, the top plate of that structure is limited to 10 feet in height. The peak of the structure is limited to whatever the height in the zoning district is. So if the height was 30 feet in that zoning district, top plate had to be 10 feet, and the peak has to be 30. As soon as you move out of the rear yard area into essentially the principal building envelope, so you're not within that back 20 feet of the lot, then that doesn't apply any longer, and you could have a taller top plate just like you could with the principal structure.
Okay, Walter?
I think it was your first slide that listed awnings, steps, and porches as part of this section of the code. And yet, everything you're proposing is pertinent to attached and detached structures.
Garages or workshops, accessory
parentheses,
structures.
workshops, garages.
Correct.
Do awnings, steps, and porches come into play very often? I understand.
No.
I understand decks might, because to me a deck is a really big porch, and some people. I had one time. 2 sides of the house was covered in decks, but.
There are currently no size limitations associated with decks, porches, or awnings. They only apply to enclosed accessory structures.
So should awnings, steps, and porches be in this code?
They're in the code because they do apply. There are setbacks that apply to decks, porches, and structures. There are encroachments that are allowed within required setback areas associated with those. So, yes, they are addressed under the code. They're just included within the definition of what's considered to be an accessory structure, and they're referenced in other areas of the code with respect to the fact that porches can extend 48 inches into the front yard setbacks, and there are other areas of the code that needs to be included.
So they're more pertinent to setbacks than anything else?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Bill before we open the public hearing? Okay, thank you, Bill. Appreciate your presentation. Just to reiterate then, this is a public hearing for the proposed amendment of Title IV, Chapter 2, Moscow City Code regarding the size of accessory structures within residential zoning districts. And so in the course of this public hearing, I'll just be inviting your comments about what's been discussed in the presentation and what you may have heard at other meetings you've attended or particulars about your own properties. With that, I'll open the public hearing and invite you to come forward to our lectern and state your name and address for our record. Okay, seeing no one come forward then, if the clock's ticked over to 1 minute, Stephanie, it hasn't, okay. We'll play the Jeopardy song for just a minute. Very good. I'll close the public hearing and open it up for the council's deliberation. How would the council like to proceed? Wayne?
I think, Bill, I think you've done a good job of cleaning up the code. It seems like it's a rare occasion when you get to go before the Board of Adjustment and they actually let you do what you want to do. So if there's been 3 times, then apparently there has been an issue, and so this does pretty well clean it up. So that would be my opinion.
Okay. Others? Sue?
Oh, I think especially in changing the R4 requirement and allowing 600 square feet per dwelling unit really helps with parking a couple of cars and storage. In R4, lots of times there's no storage for people's bicycles and camping equipment and stuff. So this allows this helps with that. And especially if someone wants to do a larger accessory building, and they can get a conditional use permit for that, and rather than proving hardship. Sometimes if you have a huge lot, and you do have a big house, and you do want a big garage to go with it for your toys, and it may not be out of character for the neighborhood, it may be perfectly fine, but to have to go to the Board of Adjustment and prove hardship, that's not right. So I think this really, P&Z learned an awful lot about this, and looked at a lot of examples, and, all the what-ifs questions were solved, so I'm happy with it.
Happy enough to put forward a motion?
Well, I was going to let someone else make a
Okay.
comment if they wanted to.
I don't think anybody wants
Nobody wants to.
No, this has
we're
been
ready
a
for you.
project for you for a while, or
all
a
right,
passion,
then
a passion.
Tim, attempt-
Motion, just make a motion. That's all I was
Okay,
gonna do.
that's fine. I'll move we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 completed separate readings, and that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay, Sue's motion and Tom's second, and I saw a hand down here. Dan? Wayne? Any other discussion? Tim?
No, ma'am.
Madam Mayor?
Yes?
Oh, with the,
Discussion about a potential amendment to the language
Okay,
and
with the-
inserting the term footprint.
with the amendment to, amending the ordinance to include the language footprint in parens.
So if I might recite what it might read.
Okay,
Please.
So looking at Section 7 of the ordinance, page 6 of 6, where it reads, size limitations contained within this code pertaining to accessory structures such as private garages and workshops shall apply to the building footprint, which would be an insertion, and then within parentheses, it would read land area, following that, land area occupied by such accessory structure, period.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, is that acceptable to the seconder?
I think that'd be fine.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll start the roll call vote with you, Dan.
Aye.
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 Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. And so we have ordinance number 2013-16, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 4, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, and Chapter 11, providing for the amendment of size limitations related to accessory structures within the FR, R1, R2, R3, R4, and RO zoning districts, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. So as amended, this ordinance is thereby approved.